Hi.
Hi.
So I'm here with my good friend and mentor, Eric Denna, today, and I'm glad to have a moment to sit down with him. We're on Sunday. We've been to church, and so we're very proper in our attire.
Otherwise, it'd be T-shirts and TVs, right?
Yeah, as we walk around on the cell phones all day talking to people, right? So Eric was actually, you started at BYU in January of 1988. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would be 30. I took Eric's first class at BYU.
Were you in the very first
I
one?
was in the very first class. You opened,
and I threw an eraser at you.
No, not the first day. That took a few days before I'd made you that before I'd been that flippant. No, you started the first class the first day with prayer. You walked in and you offered prayer.
Yeah, I did.
And you said, "I wanted to offer prayer in class for a while, and I'm grateful I'm at a place that I could do that."
Yeah.
So I remember. Then it was a few days later that I made a joke that Eric threw an eraser at me. Did you throw erasers at anybody else?
I don't think I ever did.
So
I don't think anyone ever annoyed me.
So it's in my book, but let me explain. So Eric he was teaching us about Bill McCarthy's REA models, and REA stands for Resources, Events, and Agents. And every day he would start the catechism about you can build an accounting system without having any of the accounting structures in them. And one day,
without debits and credits.
And one day when he wrote REA on the board, I said, "It's all clear to me now, Eric. REA stands for Revenue, Expenses, and Assets." And without turning around, he chucked the eraser, and it bounced off the back wall right next to me. Missed me just by a little bit.
Left the chalk mark. There was carpet on the back of the room.
Yep. So I knew that I did not understand the terms very well yet. I hadn't quite absorbed exactly that. Well, why don't you talk about a little bit? We talked a little bit about early days. What have you done since then? What's your background, and why would I want to have a conversation with you?
That's a good question.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that'll probably remain unanswered at the end of this conversation.
What, dude?
People will be sending you emails saying, "What in the world?
What's wrong with that?
Why did you record that conversation?" Let's see. I got tenure at BYU, and the semester after that, I left.
That's a typical thing to do.
Yeah. Speaks to my sanity. My wife still wonders why I did that. No, I had an opportunity to become a CIO at the division of Times Mirror, and the CEO that gave me the job is still a dear friend. I'm on a board for one of his companies, and I still wonder what possessed him to take someone. I had never supervised anyone other than TAs and research assistants.
What'd you learn from that?
I learned about risk. I mean, I learned a lot about risk from him. He took a huge risk. I mean, I went from a newly tenured professor to vice president of a Fortune 500 company over a weekend. And all of a sudden I had hundreds of people reporting to me and had offices all over the United States. And it was crazy. I mean, it made no sense. Anyone looking from the outside would have said that the CEO was certifiable.
Did he make the right choice?
It was for me. It was an incredible learning experience.
Was it from him, though, do you think?
Well, he's remained friends.
So there was some success in what you did.
I'm the only outside director of one of his companies.
How do you apply that today? I mean, you said you learned about risk. What's the principle there?
Well, he's a man of unusual common sense. And in fact, one of his favorite phrases that I love from him is, "Now there's someone that's possessed of common sense."
That's a good phrase. Yeah.
So he just had a very straightforward way of thinking through things and identifying. So here's the risk. Let's talk about the risk. What's the probability? What's the size of the risk? I mean, is it something that we're willing to take? That division of Times Mirror was sold to McGraw-Hill. They wanted me to move back to New York, and I wasn't really interested. I went back to Utah, got involved with some friends and some startups. I was teaching part-time in the MBA program, and Merrill Bateman, the president of BYU, had hired my former boss as an assistant to the president, and they had decided that they wanted a CIO at BYU, and so somehow I ended up with that.
Yeah.
I got desperate.
Yeah.
So I did that for 5 years, and then was asked to do the same thing for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I ran the global IT organization for the church for quite a few years at church headquarters, and then left and ran an HR consulting company for a friend. After a while, another friend who was CTO at Disney Interactive asked if I would join him at Ascent Media, and so in both of these conversations, it went, Dave, I don't know anything about HR. Great, just what I need. Ask lots of good questions. Help us figure this out. So same thing when I went to Ascent Media. Great, glad you don't have any background. We've done a fresh look at this. So
what came out of those though? I mean, talk a little bit about
I learned
this, but what was the benefit that these two individuals got from you, do you think, in terms of not having the background?
Well, I think you've heard me say this to you before. In fact, I just said it to you before we started this. I ask 5 questions over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And people that know me much at all say, this is all Eric knows how to do is ask 5 questions.
So I wouldn't mind if you're willing to give away 5 questions.
Oh, yeah,
on
yeah.
hand, so.
I've written about them. So question 1, and I ask these in 2 forms. Let me just go through the first form. Who do you serve and what are they trying to do? What services do you provide so they can do what they're trying to do? How do you know you're doing a great job? How do you provide the service? How do you organize? And these emerged over time through the influence of a lot of different people. And I can't say that they are unique to me, but I don't know anyone that's more anal about it than me.
Yeah, sometimes that's a very important attribute.
So what I learned over time is that too often people answer question 5 first. Who reports to who? What does the org chart look like? And then they try to cram process inside this organization structure, which just naturally breaks up processes. They don't tend to measure, they imply service, and they hope there's customers. And so this was a very overt, deliberate effort to reverse that reasoning and just say, in the end, if you're not serving someone and helping them do what they're trying to do, you're on a fairly
short
journey. Yeah, it gets bad really quick. And so I just found myself, whenever I move into a new responsibility, I'm asking these questions just to understand the history of where are we at? Why are we here?
Yeah.
And then I change one word in all the questions from do to should. So who should we serve and what are they trying to do? What services should we provide? How should we know we're doing a great job? And what I've learned is that when there's a difference in the answer to the questions, that sets up a change, the need for a change. And the earlier the difference in the questions, the greater the change. And if you look at what gets all the energy in organizations, it's just the opposite. I mean, you and I have both been big organizations.
Yeah.
What's the thing that gets everyone wound up in big organizations?
What's my position?
It's a reorg.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to reorg.
Yeah.
And here's what I've learned, and I've been guilty of this early in my career, and I've learned to do otherwise since, is that if if I can't answer the why for a change in the answer to question 5 by a change in the answers to the prior 4 questions, then it is pure politics. It's just me on a whim thinking, I want Kip to report to them instead of them. And that's about it. And as a result of that, you end up with just bizarre behaviors in an organization. And so, I don't know, I've just taught you everything I know.
No, that's good. Well, no, there's one other question I wanted to ask relative to that. How do you measure people's response to those questions? You're kind of anal about it. That means you ask the questions multiple times. How do you know to keep asking the question? I mean, one reason to not ask the question anymore is you're not getting anything meaningful from the person, and it's not progressing. But if it's a meaningful discussion, how do you judge when to keep asking that question?
So something that I typically do in a new organization. So I've been a CIO 5 times. All that means is I'm a slow learner. So each time I would ask my team that I inherited, teach me, answer these 5 questions. Go off and answer them individually. And then we'll come back together and we'll talk about them. It's crazy how often the team will get back together. And these are people that have been in the organization far longer than I have. And they'll start sharing their answers to the questions. And inevitably, someone will say,
disagree.
That's not right.
Yeah.
We don't do that. Yeah, we do. And so all of a sudden there's this wonderful education of the team coming around what really are the answers. I mean, I said, I'm not talking about descriptive answers. We're not going to get into what should we be doing. I just want to know the answers, the do form. And it's just been a terrific tool for educating a team. And then once everyone comes to an agreement, yeah, indeed, this does describe us, then just when they're starting to get settled down and they think they've got their head back on straight,
You change it to should.
I say should.
Yeah.
And then it goes nuts again.
So I called Eric in 1996 when he was at Times Mirror, and I was doing a consulting project in Chicago, and we just caught up for a minute on the phone, and I said, "Oh, now that you're out of
Academe?
Well, and also you did a little bit of consulting, so I took a chance to say, now that you're out of consulting in a sense, what would you tell a consultant?" And your words out of your mouth, I start my preface in my first book with, study history.
Yeah.
He says, I ask questions around here, and I get these different answers, and it always goes back to, something happened back there
Yeah.
that leads it to these differences.
So it's something that I've come to really admire is a discipline that I never would have imagined admiring when I was going through school, is ethnography in archaeology. It's a fundamental skill in archaeology. And it's really understanding why things are the way they are. We need more ethnography in our efforts to understand. And so my wife is a big history buff, and she's kind of turned me into enjoying history.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So,
so there's a quote that we quoted just a minute ago when we were finishing up our conversation. Would you like to share it,
Mr. Hoffer's
Mr. Hoffer's quote?
The other Eric, the famous Eric?
That's been at the bottom of your tagline on your email now for 25 years, and since email was created anyway.
I actually had a profs account at one point.
So,
did you know that?
I don't know if it had loud taglines on it, but anyway.
So it's by Eric Hoffer, and it goes, in times of radical change, learners inherit the future, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to work in a world that no longer exists.
Yeah.
And I've determined that I want to be a learner. And so I try to learn from everyone that I can.
Yeah.
And sometimes that creates some uncomfortable situations, because I just like to ask questions. And sometimes sometimes I ask questions
that
that probably shouldn't have been asked.
Yeah, I understand that. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think you can sense here that Eric, kind of, I'm in the middle of an accounting program, and he kind of broke my mind as to what accounting should always be. And I've spent now it's 30 years trying to figure out how to break that and make that real, working against the accumulated lines of code and traditional business processes to ferret out the wheat from the chaff. You don't want to throw out the wheat.
Yeah.
We have to build on the past and those foundations that have enabled what we do without throwing them away.
Well, I can honestly say, Kip, that I think you know more at a deeper level than anyone I know that knows financial systems. Big, complicated financial systems. I've wandered off and become CIO kind of stuff, and part of it is out of a frustration. You've got far more patience than I.
So I'm more anal than you are. What you just said.
I became so annoyed at dealing with financial systems that I just couldn't put up with it anymore.
Yeah.
And I just have long admired you. You understand this better than anyone, but you have a persistence that I couldn't dream.
Well, so we've just finished a conversation here, and we both agreed that our financial systems are ripe for disruption.
Well, but we've been talking about that for 30 years.
Yeah, we have. But listen, Pacquioli was 500 years, so that's 30 years compared to that. We're not even a small portion.
I'm not going to be around if you add another zero.
So
neither of us will.
No. But they will ultimately change. Our systems won't be adequate. I just recorded a blog, haven't posted yet. I said, our financial systems today are not adequate to our problems 100 years from now. I'm not sure they're adequate to our problems 5 years from now.
Well, so I would actually, over the years, I've tempered my eagerness to predict. But as I watch the mounting pressure, if I look back over the last 30 years and I look at the degree of pressure that's coming into the financial systems and the market as a whole, and all the pressure points and the pace of change and the significance of that change, I could see some pretty radical changes coming. I don't know if in the next 5 years, but certainly in the next 10. Because we're wandering into a space where there was an article written, I don't know if I ever made you read this, years ago, called New Wine in Old Bottles.
Yeah, I think I did.
And it was about, the stress on the traditional financial system. I think everyone's been surprised at how
We've survived.
how long that new wine has been fermenting in the old bottles. If we look closely, we'd see a lot of cracks, and it wouldn't take a lot. So the greater the pressure, the less you have to have a little bit more to break something.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to take a lot, but it's, we've seen this in change issues for years, for millennia, that there will be a period of pressure building over a far longer period than anyone expected.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's just this little nudge, and boom, there's a mushroom cloud, and everyone says, "What happened?" But if you trace it back, it was a long period of time that built up to that moment. I remember there was one of the most profound moments of my life occurred on a birthday when I was sitting in a Marriott hotel in Tarrytown, New York. I was teaching a financial systems class for IBM over a satellite system. And I got back to the hotel after I went on a run with Owen Charrington. He was my partner in this. Got back to the hotel, I turned on CNN, and there were people standing on the Brandenburg Gate Wall in East Germany. And I sat there for, I'm not sure I went to bed that night. I probably looked like I hadn't the next morning when I was teaching. But I was so mesmerized by this because as a little kid, I remember watching these May Day parades in Moscow and thinking,
how could that ever change?
Yeah, and all of a sudden, it seemed, man, where did this come from? But it was pressure that it had been building over decades. That all of a sudden, I can't remember exactly what the trip was, the trigger for this, but all of a sudden, there's people standing on the Brandenburg Gate. I used to use these 2 slides in presentations when I talk about change, where I somehow found the picture of the day before, and it was soldiers standing all along this wall, and then the next day, it's covered with people with pickaxes and sledgehammers and all kinds of stuff, breaking off pieces of the wall.
That's one day.
Over one day, and that's not descriptive of what happened, the process that they went through.
No.
So, I don't know anyone that's better positioned to help lead or manage that tipping point whenever it comes. And I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. No, I'm trying to give away information, trying to teach and educate, pass on to others. I've had a lot of mentors, good mentors. I've been unusually blessed in mentors. I have been unusually blessed in exceptional mentors. That's unusual. The number and quality and depth and investment
You've had some
of
good
mentors.
You've had some good
Is
ones.
unusual. Thank you, Eric.
My pleasure.
I respect Eric deeply, and you can't tell, can you? I mean, I'd love to have a conversation with him. So
We'll have to do it again. Thanks.